Hello from Hollywood. My name is Anthony Boyer. I've been a talent agent in Los Angeles and New York for the last 15 years.
And I'm Jess Canty, and I'm a talent manager here in Los Angeles. And today on Take Fountain, we are talking all about bookings. This video is part of a series that we're doing about the key terms in the entertainment industry that you're going to run into. Our previous video in this series is all about auditioning, and we will put a link to that video here.
And because you've watched it so diligently, now you've booked a job. Congratulations. So let's talk about, a casting director or a producer or a director reaches out and they want to book you. So you're going to get that offer from likely your agent or your manager, assuming that you have one. And what'll happen is they will present you with the offer in a timely manner. So if we get the offer, we want to turn it around relatively quickly and get it to you as soon as we can. Going to usually be presented over email. Sometimes, obviously, there will be a phone call involved, but you're going to get an email with all of the details so you can view them all at once. So if an offer does come into the manager, they'll usually present it to the agent first, and we'll kind of chit chat, and then we'll contact you to review, right?
Yeah, and I think most of us love making that phone call together.
Oh, yeah.
If we're
I would say if you hear from both of us,
yeah,
it's almost always a good news.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a fun way to celebrate that. One thing we want everyone to remember, if you take nothing else from this video but this, all offers are negotiable.
All offers are negotiable.
We can't stress this enough. All offers are negotiable. An offer is just that. It is the start of negotiations. And so we want to make sure that you are in that mindset when you get an offer. This is what your team is here to do. And, we did say this in the video about auditioning, but it's worth repeating. Do not feel pressure to accept an offer right away. If someone is pressuring you to accept an offer right away,
red flag.
That probably a red flag. In the normal course of business, there is room baked in for timely negotiations. Now, sometimes offers may have a short negotiation window for whatever reason, but whoever your team is dealing with is going to have been alerted to that during the process.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be prepared for that, but that is the outlier. There is time to negotiate, and ideally our job is to make sure you aren't taking the first thing that's being offered to you, that we get some kind of win.
So let's talk about what you should expect in an offer. So obviously you're going to have some reference to the show title or film title or title of the play. You're going to have a role name is included, and you're going to have an episode number if there is an episode number. So that's the bare minimum that kind of sets the tone for this is what we are offering you. Mm-hmm. And then come what we call the deal points. Now, deal points are going to include your rate, whether that's a weekly rate, whether that's a daily rate, or run a show, something like that. It's also going to matter which contract it's on. So if it's on the SAG-AFTRA modified low budget, for instance, that's got fixed rates. And then, it kind of goes from there. Low budget, ultra low budget. Those kind of have set negotiated rates. But your offer may not be those rates. It might be higher. That's the bare minimum. So it's also going to have your credit level and your billing placement. So by credit level, especially in television, it's going to be co-star, guest star, series regular. There are other fractional series regulars, recurring guest stars, things of that nature. But those are the three primary placements. We used to have something called under 5. That was an after term. I don't think that really exists anymore. People say it, but it's more informal.
Yeah.
And then I don't think it's actually, I know it's not an actual contract. The credit placement. So what does that mean? That means either in the main titles, which are usually at the beginning, but not always. It depends on where the main titles. Sometimes they will only do a main title crawl at the end. Mm-hmm. But usually, especially with episodic television, the main titles are right up front. And then they're also going to they might mention end titles instead, especially for a co-star, smaller role, you might only get end titles. It's also going to mention card, shared or single card. Basically, that means that when your name comes up on the screen, are there any other names on the screen? If there are, that's a shared card. So That is something, yes, we negotiate far more actively than you might imagine. That is actually a really big thing that we fight for. And then, a number of episodes, if it's a fractional series regular, a recurring guest, whether it's, what's called ASP or AEP, which is all shows produced or all episodes produced. And a term you're also going to see a lot of is APD, which means at producer's discretion. So what that means is the placement of your name might be at the producer's discretion. Also, the size, type, font, if it's not specified in the final deal, it might be at the producer's discretion. So that's why we try to lock in language as much as possible. So I was going to mention your dressing room situation. Now, there are a couple of different terms there. There's honey wagon, which, do you want to describe a honey wagon?
No.
Yeah.
It's the lowest form of a dressing room.
Yeah. The honey in question is, it's pee.
Yeah.
It's pee.
Yeah.
So there's a bathroom that you're not in the bathroom, but you're kind of in the bathroom. And then there is a triple banger. You might get a third of a triple banger, for instance, which means a triple banger is a trailer that's divided into 3 rooms, if you will, and you get one of those 3. You might also get a double banger, exactly the same concept. It's divided into 2. And you might, get a star trailer. You might get a star wagon, which is, that's
what you're aiming for as you progress in your career, to go from honey wagon to half of a double banger to a star wagon.
Yeah. And then also, if there's any travel, that will be in the offer. If it's business class, if it's whatever those details are, any sort of lodging accommodations, especially if it's on location, any ground transportation, those kinds of things, and then porting this over to theater, which I do a lot of theater. Many of these are very similar. We're going to be negotiating dressing room, for instance. But it's less like, there is a star dressing room in many theaters, and then there are shared dressing rooms, and it's how many people are we sharing the dressing room with. Sometimes we get really nitty gritty and discuss placement. Like some people I want in the corner of the dressing room, so they only have to share with one person. Those kinds of things are always negotiable. Anything to do with once you're on location, because with theater especially, like you're living there. Like you're there for a long time. You're there for rehearsals and for the run of the show. So, we really want to try to lock in, like, people have pets. We want to be able to get the pets to go. We want to get a gym membership. We want to get, if possible, a rental car while you're in town. And so those kinds of things are things that we will definitely negotiate also.
Now we're going to talk through sort of what can be negotiated of those general terms that you're going to hear. For example, if you are presented with an episodic scale plus 10, single day co-star, what can be negotiated? Not a lot, but your rep can certainly ask if there's any possibility of that role being paid above scale. It's sometimes nice to know that that's not a possibility, right? Just doing the ask. And then beyond that, if it is a role that doesn't yet have a name, so if it's janitor or, secretary, we can ask for a name for that role. Why does that matter? If you're looking at your resume, if you're looking at your IMDb, it's always going to look better if the character is named than if the name of the character is their job. So we typically those are 2 of the sort of main things that we will try to ask for on that basic scale co-star role that you've been offered. And
I think you hinted at something. You said something very important, and we've hit this home. We're going to say it a lot. Ask.
Yes.
Ask for more money. Ask for a name. All they can do is say no. They're not going to pull the offer.
Right.
I think people start to panic when they get the offer. You just want to work, which is great. Ask.
Yeah.
Will you get it? Probably not, honestly. Most co-stars are budgeted at scale plus 10 these days. Yeah. Well, let's talk about plus 10.
Sure.
Can we talk about plus 10? So why is it scale plus 10? According to...
And we are talking about SAG jobs, so that's the first thing.
Thank you. Yes. So we're talking about... So what scale is it is a negotiated rate that SAG-AFTRA has negotiated with the producers. That is the bare minimum they can offer. That is scale. Now, SAG-AFTRA also has a rule that an agent cannot commission if you cannot go below that negotiated minimum. So if I take commission from it, suddenly you're making less than that. We can't do that. So to entice us to actually submit our clients on breakdowns, they offer a plus 10%. So they pay our commission on top of your salary.
Right. And a good thing to note is that plus 10 really only applies to agents. So that plus 10 is in general to cover the percentage for one rep. On union jobs as a manager, I personally only commission the plus 10 if someone doesn't have an agent. So I'm not going to take more than that plus 10. Not every manager works the same way. So that is something to kind of clarify in your deal with your manager. You may have a plus 15, you may have a 15% commission deal with your manager. So they may take an extra 5% on top of that plus 10 if you don't have an agent. If you do have an agent and a manager, be prepared for that plus 10 is going to, you're going to get scale plus 10. So you're going to get 10% over that scale job. That extra 10% is going to your agent, but the remaining 10% that you owe your manager is going to dip into your pay. There is no SAG rule that says that 10% for the extra rep doesn't have to be covered.
Right. And that's, again, pertains to SAG jobs or equity jobs.
Yeah.
Also do have a scale. Non-union, you might still see plus 10 or plus 20 or plus 15. That's a little bit different, and just check with your reps. I think that's the safest way to.
Yeah. And in general, the pluses work very differently with non-union jobs.
Yeah.
When it comes to how your reps are going to be commissioning that. Every rep I know that works with, and this is mostly in the commercial world, but every rep I know that covers non-union commercials with those plus 20s explains very clearly in their contracts how they handle that with regards to your check and what they're taking, the percentage that they're taking out. Make sure you understand that language before you sign that deal. And if you are on some kind of handshake, make sure you understand how that particular agent is working with regards to non-union and those pluses.
Yeah, it's not unusual, nor is it unethical to take the plus 10 and 10%. So just know that that's a whole
other video.
Yeah. But for now, just know if someone does present that to you, that's not necessarily them trying to scam you. Right. Moving on, let's move into say a scale recurring co-star. So recurring is exactly what it sounds like, and what it is not is reoccurring. Don't say reoccurring. I hate it. It's my big pet peeve. Recurring co-stars mean a co-star that comes back, right? So, if you watch a TV show and that nurse is in every fourth episode, that's probably a recurring co-star. You can ask for the same things, and you can also ask for a guaranteed number of episodes, or what is the guaranteed number of episodes. And they might have written you into 3, but maybe there will be more. Maybe there are plans to do more. So we always want to kind of lock in okay, well, we want those 3. We want you to lock in those 3. And if you get written out, you still have to pay us for 3.
Right.
So we want to get literally a guaranteed number of episodes. If the role doesn't start as recurring, say you booked it as a co-star and they want to bring you back, maybe they liked having you on set, maybe that character was just interesting, maybe people are talking about it, whatever, we can kind of, once you get called back, we can try to get a bump there. We can try to get a guarantee there. We can negotiate on that second booking also, especially after 2 or 3 episodes. Once it becomes kind of integral to the story or the world that they've built, it's super common for us to try to set and lock in terms, because it's hard for you to stay available for a scale co-star job. Scale co-star does not pay that much. It might sound like a lot if you're, not yet booking. It's a low 4-figure number. It's not. It doesn't. It sounds not so bad, but once you have to continually take off work and do all of these things, you're not getting as much as it sounds like. So to keep yourself available for that amount of money, it's nice to have a commitment from that.
Yeah, absolutely. The next episodic level of role would be a guest star. So all the same things can be negotiated that we've already mentioned. You can also ask for what is top of show. So what is top of show?
My favorite term.
My favorite term. You may see this when the offer is presented to you via your agent. If you're reading that in the email, you may see that abbreviated as TOS. So TOS is the highest amount that is being paid for that contract level on that show. So every guest star is getting this amount throughout the season. It's not ever going higher. And so if the offer that comes in is lower, if we suspect that it's lower than their top of show, we can ask, hey, can we get them closer to top of show? Can we get them top of show? And then we just have to hear back if that's possible. Again, at the guest star level, we're probably going to ask if we can get single card placement for you in the credits. And better than that, honey wagon.
Yeah.
We're going to want you to have, a bigger space to prepare yourself. You're likely going to have more to do in the episode. You might have a bigger emotional arc.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. Why didn't we ask for a bigger dressing room when we were talking about co-stars? A couple of reasons. Number one is they're not going to give it to you.
Right.
Number two is it's such a short commitment on your end. You're there probably a day, maybe 2 or 3, but it's a pretty small amount of time that you're there, so it's not a big deal. Also, just personally speaking, I really advocate, if you're in the co-star world, spend your time on set.
Right.
Like, be on the set watching and observing if they'll allow you, which they usually will. Yeah. So I think, spending time in the trailer is not always the best use of your time, although it is there for you to use that. Moving on to a recurring guest star. I like that I get all the recurs.
Yeah.
What does a recurring guest star mean? Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. It means that you are a guest star and you are coming back. Now, when you start to think about TV shows, these are probably a lot of the characters you start to think about other than the series regulars. These are people who are in many episodes and maybe they have a full arc. Sometimes it is just 2 or 3 episodes, but many times this is someone who comes back for an entire season or multiple times across each season. These are the actors that kind of populate the world who aren't the principal lead actors of the series. And so they're very important to a show. And you'll find a lot of times this is a place where, writers or producers will see you in a guest star role, and that's when they start to call you back and recur. You'll start to recur on a series, and it's a really exciting time for me anyway, for a client, because it kind of usually signifies that things are starting to take off a bit. So for me, we can negotiate all of the above. As again, everything we talk about will be like, yes, and then the other thing we want to talk about is, again, a guaranteed number of episodes, especially in the recurring world. Sometimes the breakdown or the offer will specify it's 2 episodes or it's 3 episodes, but we still, again, want to get a guarantee because we want to make sure if you're blocking off that time that you are getting compensated for it. So we want a commitment from them. Obviously, this is where we're going to try to improve the billing. We're going to try to improve the placement. We want to go back for that at least triple banger. Mm-hmm. And then also, if it's a large enough role, if it carries a significant arc or something, we're going to ask about trades. So the trades are, Deadline, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter. We want press announcements. So we'll ask you, will you guys be doing it? Do you want us to handle it? How would you like to handle press? So that typically happens on those larger recurring guest stars.
Yeah, and you'll see, leading up to a second season of the show, you'll see Deadline articles about who's coming back as, sort of in the weeks leading up to the show. Quite often, those things are pre-negotiated. And so you want to be, if they're bringing you back to recur in the second season and you now have 4 guaranteed episodes over the 2 guaranteed episodes in the prior season, maybe one of those extras that we ask for is that you're part of that announcement of, hey, this character is coming back this season, along with, and so then your face is in the trades next to maybe someone who has a bigger recurring arc or something like that, which is only good for you. Next would be fractional series regular. So as it sounds, you are in a fraction of the total number of episodes for that season. Usually at this stage, you've hopefully been offered a triple, like a third of a triple or a half of a double banger. You've been offered, and those episodes, that fraction is guaranteed, essentially. So the only other things to, you're probably getting single card, or it's shared card with like someone else who's really big on the show or something like that. And that just has to do with the amount of time that they have to get through all the credits at the top or something. But most of those things are probably included in this deal. One thing to think about, especially if it's a show that requires you to travel back and forth, if it's not shooting near your home location, is to kind of up the asks on those travel and accommodations. Kind of like you were saying, maybe it's, hey, we need a rental car every time they're there because they need to be able to go shopping. They don't want to have to eat, crafty. Hey, can we get, instead of one first class ticket, can we get 2, premium coach tickets because they actually want to bring their partner out on half of the episodes. And so, can we arrange these flights differently? Something like that. So again, anything in your head that would make your life better as you are participating in these jobs, ask your rep, and we'll tell you if that's something that we can bring and ask for.
I will say too, once we get into the series regular world, there's no longer a scale. So we're typically breaking what would have been called top of show. At that point, we're typically talking about a much higher amount of money also. Right. So one other thing that I like to negotiate with my fractionals is billing in episodes that they're not in. Some shows will do that, some won't.
Yep.
But I always want, like, it's in you've timed out your credit sequence, you might as well have them in all of them.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a full-on series regular. This is it. This is the big leagues. Congratulations. And you can negotiate everything we've talked about and then some. So in a full series regular, assuming we're talking about all shows produced, ASP, AEP, all episodes produced, at this point, you're probably going to want to involve a lawyer in your deal. Whether that is a test deal, which means that you are testing to book the series regular, which typically happens when a show is first starting out, although they may test people if they're adding, say, a season 2 series regular or something, or if it's just a straight offer, if it comes off an audition. At whatever point in the life of the series you're being added, I would get the lawyer involved. We mentioned test deals, so typically what happens is before you book a series regular, you do a test. You might do 2. You used to do a studio test and a network test. These days, it's typically 1. And
because the studio is also distributing their own thing. So
yeah, exactly.
There we
go. So it's basically an audition. They can work different ways. Make sure you talk to your rep and understand what the format is going to be. But it's really just an audition, a final audition. What's different about it, though, is usually we have negotiated up to 6 years or 6 seasons of the series before you ever book the job. So this is a big thing that we spend our time doing, and that the entertainment attorney spends their time doing, is negotiating contracts for jobs that have not been booked yet. So that's something to know, is that test deal is, there's going to be language, there's going to be verbiage. There's no way we can get into it in this video because it's just so much to it. But that's something where you're going to want to make sure that your team is up to the challenge.
And the one thing I would say, if you are in the position of, okay, this is the first time this is happening to you, you're presented with a test deal, your agent and or manager helps you find a lawyer, you bring a lawyer onto the team, the lawyer asks you a bunch of questions about what you want, they go negotiate something, and then they send you this 25-page document full of legalese. In my opinion, that's really where your manager can be super helpful. It depends on the lawyer. I work with a bunch of great lawyers. Many lawyers do work on commission now, just like managers and agents do. So it's
typically
5%, not 10, 3 to 5%, not 10. They may be happy to take the time to go through that document with you sort of paragraph by paragraph and answer any questions. But, you know, if you happen to have a lawyer that's on retainer instead of a percentage, or if for whatever reason your lawyer doesn't typically take the time to go through that in that way, your next best place would be to talk to your manager, see if they feel comfortable explaining any language. And obviously your agent can too. You should never, ever, ever sign anything that you do not understand. I am always sort of shocked that clients will kind of completely trust their team. We're not the ones signing our signature to this paperwork, and you should know what you're agreeing to.
Yeah. So let's talk about some things you might want to negotiate in a series regular deal. Again, we can't get into everything, but one thing we can get into is moving costs or relocation fees. So let's say that you live in Atlanta and you book a series regular for a show that shoots in Canada. Congratulations, you're moving to Canada. Let's say you're moving to Vancouver. You're going to want to be compensated for that, right? So typically you're going to negotiate a relocation fee. Now that might be a temporary relocation or a permanent relocation. That's none of their business. So it's really just for them to pay to relocate you during the time that you're shooting their series. Publicity fees, who's going to be handling the publicity. Unit publicists for the production are usually great. However, having your own publicist is really a step up in your career when you're able to add a publicist to the team. So talking about, who's paying for that and can we get that? And then various and sundry pieces to that, like, grooming when you do press appearances and transportation when you do press appearances and those kinds of things. We're going to start to negotiate all of that in here also.
So yeah, the only other thing I think that's worth mentioning here, because we can't get into everything in that 25-page contract, is the term first position. So that means that show is going to require you to basically be beholden to that show, and probably at the expense of other work. And usually they have the right to allow you or not allow you to take other work while you're on that show. How does this work out in practicality? If you get a test deal, let's say that deal is for $50,000 an episode. You shoot the pilot, you get paid $50,000 per your contract, but they have a year to decide whether or not to pick that show up and shoot the rest of the show and put it on air. You could potentially be living for that entire year on $50,000. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but in Los Angeles, that is a difficult thing to do when you are potentially not allowed to take any other work.
Yeah, particularly if you're at the level where you're booking series regulars, there's probably quite a bit of work you could be booking.
Right. So you may have to, if you're in first position to this show, you may have to go to them and say, and your reps are going to have to go to them and say, hey, they're up for a guest star on this. You haven't started shooting your show yet. Can we get clearance to do that? And they go, you know what? That character's similar to the character you're going to be playing in our show. We don't want that conflicting. We want to hold you back for our show. So I bring this up because you want to make sure that whatever you're agreeing to, if it is that kind of deal with where it's not that they're immediately going into production, but they are going to shoot a pilot first, that whatever your per episode rate is something that works for you in your life, if that is the only work you get for the time period of that option term.
Yeah. In general, what I'm trying to negotiate is less exclusivity for more money.
Right.
So they'll have all kinds of limits sometimes. They might say like, well, you can't do a competing show. You can't be on this network or that network. And we're trying to carve out, is the term we use, carve out additional guest star appearances, because sometimes they'll say like only 4 guest star appearances and only up to 3 episodes in each one. So we're just trying to carve out more space. And you mentioned first position. Now you might be wondering, well, what about second position? And yes, you can actually book things in second position. If you are already attached to a series, a pilot or a series might bring you on understanding that they don't have you that you're beholden to the first series and you can shoot that in second position. It's rare, and if you're watching this video, it's probably a little bit on the horizon, but it is a pretty exciting thing to play around with. So something to think about.
Good problems to have.
Yeah.
Okay, so that sort of basically covers all of the main contracts you're going to run into in episodic. Let's talk about film contracts. So again, same kinds of things you're going to see in film contracts in terms of, the rates, the trailers, the named characters, the credit level, the billing placement, main titles, cards, all of that. Some things that are going to be additionally specific to film and the way film works and how that's different than episodic. First of all, there is a large number of SAG contracts that are used for film. We mentioned these at the top. They go all the way from micro budget to what is called SAG low budget. Each of these have maximum thresholds of the budget of the piece, and they have minimums that they must pay you. So I think SAG ULB or UPA, which is ultra low. I think the rate today is like $241 a day plus 10, but that project cannot exceed a budget level, I think, of $250,000.
Yeah, it gets pretty arcane because they can buy a higher budget with diversity casting, and so it's hard to pin down a number, but that's
but in general, so there are these kind of levels to these things where the project has a maximum budget level in order to be able to pay you that minimum for scale. Something that you always want to check with your offer in these, especially ultra low and moderate low, is if your offer is MFN. What does MFN mean? It means most favored nations. It means that nobody else is getting better terms than you are getting, especially with regards to pay. So if they say, listen, this is a ULB project, it is scale plus 10, so that's $241 a day, and we go back and say, hey, how about double scale? And they say, we can't do that. Then the next question out of our mouths is, can you tell us that the scale plus 10 is MFN, to make sure that no one else on that project is getting a better deal. Pay or play is another term you'll hear, and you'll hear this from the smallest contract all the way up to, Scarlett Johansson is pay or play for a project she's in. Basically means that whether or not this project goes and whether or not you're used in this project, you're going to get paid anyway. Another thing we can ask for is that the money that is going to be paid to you for the entirety of your contract on this project is escrowed. It means that they have to prove that that money is in a bank account before you start production. The reason for this is a lot of these small productions will, only have half the money raised when they get started. Yeah. All of a sudden they're shut down, and yet you've turned down other work for this. So we want to make sure in the best case scenario that we know that they can pay you before they start shooting and pay you the full amount that your contract is worth. We can talk about, minimum turnaround times between your working days so that you don't have a night shoot and then you have to, be on set the next morning 4 hours later at 8 a.m. Again, the way that some of these smaller productions do scheduling, it may be a less experienced producer. They may not be paying total attention to every single person's schedule. So we want to talk about making sure that that doesn't happen. Hair and makeup consults. I have a performer that's a drag performer who, they went to set and the makeup artist was going to do drag makeup on this performer that performs in drag. Right. And they're like, yeah, but I have a specific look that I've crafted for my drag persona. You want to make sure that, we have a lot of clients that are Black that want to make sure that the hairstylist has experience with Black hairstyles, with knowing how to style them properly, with knowing what's appropriate in terms of products that can be used, or if they are asking that your hair is a certain way prior to showing up, and that is something that costs you money to accomplish, whether it's, your hair needs to be dyed a certain color or they want a certain cut, that those costs are covered.
I also want those mistakes to be theirs and not yours.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A huge one for film is back-end points. You never know where something is going to go. Again, especially on these really low budgeted projects, they may go into a festival and get picked up by a distributor, and all of a sudden you are in the next Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, read that story.
Yeah.
It's a sad story.
It's unfortunately very sad. And again, these are things we always want to make sure we're asking for. So if they say there's no back-end points, and then we say, well, is that MFN with everyone else? At least no one else in your position is getting better. The odd thing about the business we're in is that in all of these negotiations, and especially in the film world, you are in the position of protecting yourself against the upside. You are in the position of protecting yourself against wild success. And so we want to make sure that, again, if this little film that you're in becomes, the next Paranormal Activity, that hopefully you get to participate in that outside success. And then some other, smaller things we may kind of ask for are, again, upgraded travel and accommodations, guaranteed copy of the footage within a certain time frame, passes for you and a guest to premiere and major festivals, and publicity fees, again, is something else that outside of that sort of general contract that they're going to present with the offer is something else that we can ask for.
Next, we can chat a little bit about theater bookings. Many of these things are very similar. Again, remembering that you're going to be effectively on location for weeks, months at a time. Maybe it's a tour, maybe it's a Broadway show. Congratulations. So some of the things that we might talk about. It's a very similar thing where there are levels of contracts. So a Broadway show, every Broadway show, well, most Broadway shows you see are under what's called a production contract. I say most because the Roundabout Theater actually uses a LORT A+ contract, which is a little bit less. So production is sort of the big number one contract. On the tours, the smaller they get, there are tiers. So you might get a tier 1 tour, a tier 2 tour, and the scale amounts drop as you go down on those. The next sort of higher up contract for theater is the LORT Theater contract. It's the League of Resident Theaters. This is sort of the premier non-Broadway theaters around the country. There are many of them. Most of the most prestigious ones you think of, those are LORT theaters, whether it's the Pasadena Playhouse or, the Alliance Theater in Georgia or, like any sort of like high prestige theater. And then there are many other contracts. It's not a strict tier system, but there are regional contracts like the CAT contract, which is Chicago Area Theater. There's the Korst contract. There's all kinds of contracts. There's the CLO contract and gosh, so many. NEAT, that's the Northeast Agreement, whatever. I don't even know. It's neat. So there are lots of contracts, and they all come with not just their own pay rates, but also their own rules that they must follow. So things that you're going to want to ask about and things that you're going to want to negotiate are outs. Let's say that you book a Broadway show, or let's say you book a film. Let's say that you book a TV show. Are they going to let you out? Do we have TV film outs? Do we have commercial outs? How much notice do you have to give to vacate the contract? Whether you're going to be on a 2-week out, a 4-week out. Again, there is a little bit of flexibility as far as leaving, but it's only for certain projects. And then other things that you're going to want to think about: transportation to and from, housing once you're there, single housing, kitchen facilities, per diem. Not all theaters have to give you per diem, especially if they do offer kitchen facilities. That's an equity rule. Many contracts, if they give you a kitchenette, they do not need to give you per diem. So that's something that you can negotiate. You can negotiate ground transportation once you're in town. So what does that mean? Will they give you a rental car, or will they give you access to a car so that you can go to the gym, so that you can go get groceries?
For your kitchenette.
For your kitchenette. Speaking of gyms, I always get a gym membership for my clients. 9 times out of 10, the theater has a partnership with a local gym. Sometimes we have to fight a little bit more, but 9 times out of 10, it's a very easy give for them. At the very least, they'll usually give you a discounted rate because, one of their sponsors is a gym or something. So these are things that you can negotiate. Again, dressing rooms. How many people are you sharing your dressing rooms with? The other thing is billing. A lot of times you'll hear non-preferential billing. What that means is, so we're talking about in billing, we're talking about the playbill, the program. Non-preferential means that either it's order of appearance, so your name and character appear in the order in which you appear in the show, or alphabetical. But we can negotiate above the title. We can negotiate, blocks, tiers of billing in that, build with the principals, for instance.
It did just spark something for me sort of on the film side as well. And also this applies to episodic. The lead already has first position billing, so their name is going to come first in the credits. Maybe we negotiate a with or an and credit for you.
Those are my favorites.
Yeah, and you'll see this, pay attention. I think we love when clients are students of the industry. When you're watching the next episode of Law & Order that you watch, pay attention to those special guest star or with so-and-so or and so-and-so. Those are
sometimes you'll negotiate a with and then they'll stick an and on after you. And it's like, I did all that work. You would be amazed how much time and effort and energy we expend negotiating billing, which I have never had an actor actually care about. That is really for me, for the reps. I mean, the famous story is Heather Locklear when she did Melrose Place and they wouldn't put her first. So she's like, then I want to be last. So she got... I don't know that was the first and, but it was a very significant and. So those are big things that we fight over. We spend a lot of time and energy, but also in theater, So it is an issue where, we are fighting for billing a little bit. It's typically tiered or non-preferential in most theater, though.
Yeah. We've gone through all the contracts. You've got all of the information you need, almost all of the information you need. We just want to talk about some other things that can happen to you around booking. So one of those things, what do you do if you are approached directly? So this booking...
I want to put you in a movie.
Exactly. I'm going to make you a star.
Yeah.
If you don't have any reps, this is a great time to ask a rep for help. Maybe you had a meeting with a manager 6 months ago. Maybe you had a meeting with an agent 6 months ago. They weren't able to sign you, but they said, keep me posted on what you're up to. You get approached to be in something, you've got an offer on the table. Take that rep up on that offer of keeping in touch and say, hey, could you look at this for me as a favor? I'm happy to pay you a commission on this if you'd like. Would you consider actually negotiating this for me and, kind of hip pocketing me, taking commission on just this one project? So if you don't have anyone like that to go to, if you don't have those relationships yet, ask a friend that might be willing to introduce you to a rep that they know their reps, don't mind doing this on one-off basis for people who don't have reps yet. Another thing to do is ask if someone ask if someone knows a lawyer or if you know a lawyer, just to take a look at what you're being offered. Ideally, you want an entertainment lawyer, but any lawyer should be able to at least take a look at that and say, hey, here are some things you need to think about, especially when you're looking at a long-form contract and you don't have reps. If you have reps and you are approached directly, either because you have a great relationship with a filmmaker and they want to put you in their next project, or because maybe production is trying to avoid talking to representation, which sometimes can happen.
Yeah, I tend to give the benefit of the doubt.
I do too. I
think most people are just trying to do the right thing, but you will find that they'll come to you because for whatever reason.
Yeah.
However, it is very important, if you have reps especially, that you don't say, I accept. Yeah. You don't say yes. what you say is like, can you send this to my team, to my reps?
I think and just to add on to that, the best thing to say is, I am so excited about this role. I need to run everything through my reps. Please contact them. If you're worried about them thinking that your excitement isn't there by not saying yes, then you can certainly communicate your excitement, but you absolutely want to have your reps being the ones to negotiate that offer for you for all of the reasons that we've talked about. I can't tell you how many times that clients have accidentally accepted an offer without knowing it, because production has come to them and they've literally said in an email, yes, please contact my reps. Yes, please contact my reps is the worst thing that either of us can hear, because we have been left with zero leverage to be able to negotiate all the things that we've talked about. Production already knows you want to do it. You've basically put on paper that you've agreed to whatever they've offered. And so it can be very hard for us to get you anything beyond that initial offer.
And by the way, we're not just trying to you're going to have to commission us anyway.
Right.
If you're signed with us, let us do our job. Let us contribute value to this. Whether or not we can even get a raise, like you might have a casting director friend or a producer friend or a director friend say, hey, we don't have any money. This is the deal. You still want it to run through us because our job is to protect you. And we're not going to ruin your relationship. Like, we do this professionally, they do this professionally. I think that's the thing. I think people panic that they might lose the job or the relationship. But the truth is, I've been handed a lot of bad contracts that were closed without me ever looking at them.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because they're very hard to fix once they've been accepted.
Exactly. And, I know of at least one story where someone went in, and this is, they were in the room for a very, very marquee franchise, and were told in the room, so-and-so is up for this, bigger name than you is up for this, but if you accept today, we'll hire you. Now, this person very, very smartly said, thank you so much. I am so excited about this role. My representation will be very unhappy with me if I do not bring them in at this point. Please feel free to contact them right now. They are responsive. They will not hold this process up. I understand you want to move quickly, but I am going to just have to say, I'm excited about this, and please contact my reps. Yeah. And so, the pressure to accept things only can sometimes get worse. It's not just at this low budget level. It can actually get worse the bigger the project is.
I've got stories I cannot tell.
Exactly. So that's just one example. Names left out to protect the innocent. But yeah, so just know that if you get in the habit of doing this early in your career, of just never saying yes, expressing your enthusiasm, expressing your excitement, and immediately tossing it over to your reps, it will be such a habit that by the time you get to that place where there's really something career changing on the line, you just won't even think about it. What do you do when you have a full team? What is the ideal situation in our minds in terms of who does what on that team? So you have an agent, you have a manager, and you have a lawyer. How does that flow go? Now, as the CEO of your business, hopefully you have actually had this discussion with your entire team prior to there being an offer on the table, so everyone understands what their role is. I am talking about this because, earlier in my career as a manager, I didn't realize it was sort of my job to make sure that when an actor kind of wanted to bring someone else on the team, let's say we're working together and then we probably need to bring on a lawyer, that it's a good idea to organize a phone call or a Zoom to say, hey, Anthony, not just, hey, Anthony, we brought a lawyer on the team, right? Yeah. But hey, we're thinking of bringing a lawyer on the team. Anyone you like working with, great. We interview a bunch of people. We decide on the lawyer. But then after that, to say, hey, Anthony, let's you, me, and lawyer get on and let's talk about the workflow. Because the last thing you want to have happen is, the lawyer to assume that they are going to take lead on negotiations when an offer is on the table, and also have your agent assume that they're taking lead. That can, we want to present a united front to production, and oftentimes these things will happen over the phone. In general, the way I've worked, and you can correct me if I'm saying anything that's not normal to you, but in general, the agent will, when you have a full team like this, the agent will negotiate sort of the high level points of the deal, the things like, the minimum per episode that you're getting paid, the guaranteed number of episodes, and then the lawyer is going to take that information and run with it. The lawyer may know that there's more money to be had, and they'll hopefully communicate that to your agent, but they're going to negotiate all of the nitty gritty of that deal. And then, like I said, the manager's there to sort of be a second eye and to help communicate anything extra that you want.
So I think it's always helpful when we can all jump on a call, because we all have knowledge, but we all have different knowledge. So I might have someone who's also I might be doing another deal for another client on this project. You might have the lead in the series, and then the attorney is almost definitely either going to have deals that they're doing with this same project, or at the very least, they know the business affairs rep. They do business. That's what they do all day long, has these deals. So I always figure a lot of this work gets done on the golf course.
Exactly.
So always having everyone involved. Like you said, I like to do sort of the big deal points and then pass it off to the lawyer, but we all like to be typically all involved in the conversations. And of course, you will be involved in the conversations too. I don't ever move anything. I never return without speaking to the client. So
absolutely.
Counters all happen as a team.
You'll be asked for closing information sometimes. So, if you're brand new with an agency, they may or may not have all this information on file. So you may get an email from them being like, what's your social security number?
Yeah.
Like, what's your date of birth? And that is totally normal.
I want to take a second about date of birth, because people get real cagey about it, and I understand why. Your team only needs your date of birth because they might need to book you on an airplane. Yeah. That's really the primary reason. We're not spreading it out. We're not putting it on the internet. I understand why you might be sensitive about it, but just know that it's used internally. When you book an airline ticket, I need a date of birth.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And so, other things in closing information are going to be, is your billing name different than your legal name? How do you want it spelled? Make sure that, there's no typos in that when you reply back, because that's what's going to end up on the screen most likely.
Are you a loan out?
Yes. Do you have a company that you run all of your work through? If that's the case, you're going to be signing totally different start paperwork. So you want to let us know if all of a sudden, you have a loan out now and you didn't before.
Well, so that's another thing that we'll add in the language a lot of times, is if you don't have a corporation now, we will negotiate the right to convert to a loan out later.
Yeah, that's a good point. Congratulations. You'll hear the deal is closed. Yay. You're going to be asked to sign that long form contract. Hopefully you've reviewed it with your team. Sometimes you will be presented it digitally. Hopefully that system that distributes that has also distributed it to your team. Do not assume that has happened. You should check with your team to make sure they got a copy of the contract as well, and that the contract that they're expecting to be on that service for you to sign, and all of the things that they work so hard to negotiate, is the thing you're actually signing. They should be able to give it a once over. If you're presented with that deal on set, these days you'll be able to scan pages of things right from your phone, scan all of that language, send it over to your rep, have them give it the once over before you actually sign that, to make sure there's no mistakes, to make sure everything that's been negotiated is in there. And then you're going to probably be asked for a check authorization. That means the agency is going to collect on your behalf. When you sign the contract, you need to put that agency's information in the part of the contract that is directing where the pay goes. Quite often, clients will sign the check authorization and then fill out their own information in the contract and then be surprised when the check doesn't go to their agent and comes to them. That is why that's happening. The contract supersedes. So, and sometimes that mistake is made anyway.
Yeah.
But
Frequently.
Yeah.
Especially these days.
but if you have questions about whose information goes where when you're filling out any kind of contract, go back to your team and ask. And then show up on time with a great attitude, be ready to work, and turn that co-star into a recurring.
And then into a fractional.
Yeah.
And then into a series
And
regular.
then into a series regular because they love you and they love working with you and you're so knowledgeable and you're rocking it out on set.
Thank you again for watching. If you got value out of this video, click that thumbs up button. This has been Take Fallon. Thank you so much.
Shit. It's
That's okay. I mean, I was trying to be funny. So.